Hello, this is Jack Gilbert, and this is a deeper dive into the topic of strengthening everyday ethics in the organization. We're going now to about 10,000 feet. So just to understand, there are lots of examples and conversations to have an engagement with the audience. But I'm going to give you some outline of the conversation as it typically occurs. Typical learning outcomes are to really appreciate the role of organizational values in strengthening an ethical culture. To understand the role that ethical erosion and ethical wisdom play in shaping everyday ethics. This is very much about everyday ethics, and I'll come to those dynamics in more detail. And to understand and apply 5 daily disciplines of an ethical culture. The ethical pathway, and we'll come to that term as well, that I focus on most is the one of culture. And finally, to bring it back home, always to bring it back home to the 1 or 2 actions that the audience can take in order to move forward the conversation and the insights they may have had. Just some background for the conversation. I was a slow learner, so I got my doctoral dissertation when I was 59. And I had been a consultant for many years, and I had fallen in love with the topic of ethics and the role of ethics in conversation in organizations. And in fact, the long title, of course, for my dissertation was the role of ethics in decision-making for senior executives in large management consulting firms, which I was familiar with. And I spoke to senior partners in large firms in an effort to really understand the field more. If I move forward a bit, I had more to do, and I was asked by the American Hospital Association Press, because I have a background in healthcare, to write a book which was titled Strengthening Ethical Wisdom. And that took really my understanding far beyond my thesis into a bigger and a more complete picture. In terms of presentations, while it started in healthcare, I've presented this to many people with many backgrounds in many industries, because it really is about universal dynamics, not particularly healthcare dynamics. Nor is it about bad apples or theory, especially not theory, but very practically about everyday ethics and simply our own human behavior. I come from the point of view of respect for audiences always, but in this particular case, it's very important because people, when they hear about ethics, think, oh goodness, I'm going to find out what I'm not doing or doing wrong. This is not about that. This is insights to really see opportunities to strengthen ethical wisdom in our own actions and in the actions of the organization. So let me come to the framework that I work from and build it with you and then discuss certain elements of it. Every organization has some vision, mission, values, strategy, goals, things, some of which they emphasize more than others, but the intention is to transform those intentions into performance. And we can look at just general characteristics of performance. When I'm speaking to an industry organization, it's different than healthcare, for example, but they are essentially the same. They're essentially the same. And that's the goal of organizations. And we're very interested in ethical pathways to get from here to there, because we know there are many ways to get there. And we have examples of organizations that have really been profoundly unethical in getting from one place to the other. The first dynamic I mentioned was the ethical erosion. I introduce this sometimes with just an anecdote with the audience about having a teenager, and you're the parent, and you say to the teenager, be home at 10. And the teenager comes home at 10:05 and you say nothing. Next time, be home at 10. And the teenager comes home at 10:15 and you say nothing. By the way, by now, most of the audience has got where we're going with this. And so this becomes later and later, and you say nothing. And 3 months down the road, you're saying, where have you been all night? But it didn't start with not being home all night. It started with 5 minutes. And that's the nature of ethical erosion, that it is that small step that becomes the norm and allows for other steps. Let me give you an example from industry. This actually is from my doctoral dissertation. I'll let you read it. But it's only a little bit wrong. And I share other examples of this and invite the audience as well to really engage with me on what they've seen in their own life. Very much a human dynamic, not a bad person dynamic. So if ethical erosion is subtle, and it is, then we need something to counteract it that's subtle, and I'm suggesting that's ethical wisdom. And it's that, you could say, that inner voice, or something that when a decision is made or being talked about or something's happening in an organization, we almost have a feeling just discomfort, even a gut feeling. So it's something, however, that needs to be respected. In high reliability organizations, the term used as faint, I think faint signals or weak signals, sometimes called weak signals. Those indicators of something else that's there. So we have these two dynamics, and let's come to ethical pathways in more detail. By the way, none of this is biblical. I made it up, but I hope that it is useful. The first is culture, the behaviors, the everyday behaviors. The second is leadership, what leadership draws us to in directions and what they say is important. Infrastructure. How many of us have worked in organizations where we're told it's really important to do the right thing, and at the end of the day, everybody gets 3%, and you won't find anything about doing the right thing on the performance appraisals. And finally, personal integrity, what we bring to the organization, because we come with values. We have values ourselves, and sometimes they're dissonant with our organizations, and sometimes they really connect with our organizations. And let's look at just one of those pathways. And this is culture, and I'm going to suggest for every one of those pathways, there are a certain set of limited disciplines that if we followed them every day, we would actually strengthen everyday ethics in the organization. So what are they for culture? The first is mindfulness, just being aware that something may not be right, or something is not working, or just because it's business as usual doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. And that's, in a sense, the private voice of ethical wisdom, which brings us to voice itself outside into the public. We've all been in meetings where nobody wanted to be in the meeting anyway. And the last thing we want to do is slow down the action, but we feel something is not right with something that's being decided and the way it's being decided. We look around and everybody seems fine, and we may just let that go. But it's important that we not only can claim that point, that moment, but also be encouraged to do so by the organization, to have the room to do so, and have it valued by the organization. The third discipline is respect. If there is no respect between people, there is argument, there is blame. There is not the sense of let's come together and talk about this, which is vital to a conversation to move forward ethical behavior. There's tenacity. I mentioned healthcare. Everyone in healthcare would love to give the best care possible in every moment. But we live in organizations where there needs to be a margin as well. So some things that would actually lead us to better patient care have to be compromised just by keeping the organization alive and being able to fulfill on its mission. So the tenacity is really about doing the best thing we can right now, but keeping working at it, not giving up, and not feeling like it has to be perfect now. And finally, legacy. Are we making this decision because it's best for the future, or just we have to get by today? And sometimes we make decisions to get by today, but being conscious of that is important, because on the whole, we want to make decisions that actually strengthen the organization in the long term. Having been through this and talked with the audience and had got examples from the audience along the way and maybe had them share with each other, we just reflect on the daily disciplines of ethical culture. And my question is, which one seems most important for you to strengthen in yourself? Which one seems most important to strengthen in the organization? And they may be different. This is not to really share and expose within the conversation, depending on how comfortable the audience is. If it's a work group, sometimes it goes further. But for a general audience, it's just to really have insights for themselves, because, again, we're going to bring it back home. What are the 1 or 2 actions that you could do within the next week to actually strengthen ethical behavior, everyday ethical behavior in your own organization? So that's the 10,000-foot view. I'm happy to hear from you at Jack at jgilbertassociates.com, or you can go to my website as well. Thank you.